All right, welcome everyone. Today I'm going to be fishing floating minnow. This is the hardcore minnow made by Duel. I'm going to show you guys a few tips on how I fish these shallow streams. There are some pools here. They're about 2.5 feet deep usually, but it's a really good way that you can imitate some different forage like terrestrials that came down. So if you want to see how to fish these or just some general brook trout fishing in general, keep watching. Also comment down below what you use for floating minnows. All right, to start off, the lure I'm using, this is made by Duel. It's a kind of a sub company of Yozuri. If you ever heard of Yozuri, like the Pins minnow, that's like an iconic floating minnow. This is the hardcore minnow 50F. It says bass on there, but I just like to ignore that for trout fishing. Some things I like about it: has a thick, durable bill on there. I take this front split ring off. Because I use a tiny little owner snap on there, you get better action out of the bait. And I also replaced the stock treble hooks with single hooks on here. It's a nice gold flash color. There's a huge variety of different colors. I like to use gold, especially right now the water's a little bit dirty from rain runoff. And I like to use these floating baits. They kind of imitate, at least in my head, it's been really windy for the past couple of days, and it's been raining too. So a lot of those terrestrials like grasshoppers and such, they'll fall into the water. But also a lot of the bait fish are about this size or a little bit smaller too. So I'm kind of hitting a bunch of different prey groups all with just using one lure. So I'll go over how I fish it coming up here. That's one thing with floating lures. Suspending lures can kind of do it. Sinking lures definitely can't. And it's late fall, it's early fall right now, and there's a lot of grass that grow over from the summer, and a lot of times trout will hide up in that grass. It's really hard to fish for them, but a floating lure, especially right now, I could see that there's a decent amount of water on top of it. I can just cast the lure in there, just give it a couple twitches, just get some flash. I can come right over the top of those, and a lot of times brook trout will come up and hit it. And I just kind of let it float up over those logs, and it'll get carried down in the current just like this. And wherever you play your line, that's where your lure is going to face. If you just have just let it sit in the current, it's never really going to touch the bottom unless you're shallow, but that's a good way to get stubborn bites. If you know that there's a hole that's downstream and you have the equipment and a net to be able to bring that fish upstream, you can actually just let it dance right in front of like a log, and a lot of times the fish will come up and hit it. Oh, got one here. Ooh, he feels like a nicer one. Oh yeah. Ooh, we're getting the orange on him now. Come here. Ooh, there we go. Oh, come on. He's running away from me. There we go. Nice looking fish. He came right off. There's a little bit of wood up there. He came. Let me unhook you. Get this hook out of the way. And these single barbless hooks is so nice for unhooking fish. See, nice brook trout. And the white tips, orange fins. Real nice looking fish. I'm gonna let it go. No, I can't attribute, oh, that one would have only been caught with the floating lure, but it was nice. I could make some contact with wood, and I just let it sit there, and it just kind of rose up and drifted with the current. A lot of times if there's terrestrials that fall in, or worms or whatever that's kind of stunned, they're going to follow the current naturally. So sometimes, especially in this shallow water, if you have a really aggressive sinking lure, which casts really nice, if you have a really aggressive sinking lure that comes through there, it's almost unnatural, and it kind of bullies the other fish out of the way. So a floating lure is a little bit more subtle way that you can fish these streams. On the same note, you can fish these really aggressive. I'll do it up here on the log that you can see up there. You can fish them just like a crankbait, just going down, making contact, and then And then when you make contact, you kind of like let it sit up, or you just keep cranking through like rocks and logs. And what it'll do, seeing how it floats and it's more buoyant, it's not tracking as easy as a sinking lure. So it'll hit those rocks and it'll deflect up really hard, just like a square bill crankbait you would for bass. All right, so the gear I'm using today, so the rod, this is the Surinora Aries. This is the 4'7". It's a 2-piece. It says ultralight, but it's actually an extra ultralight, just based on the power and what the description of the rod says. The reel, this is an Alpha's Air TW. This has a Roro BFS spool in there. This is the thickened model that I have in here right now. Most times I run the standard breaking model, but I just wanted to use the thickened model, see, because it was really windy and I'm also casting a little bit lighter lure, and it's handled it really good. The reel looks a little different. It was painted by Sagisi Customs. Also, that's where the drag clicker comes in right here. As you can hear when fish are pulling out line. And then the line, this is 4-pound Verivis Super Trout Advanced. This is Bush Trail. And having a bright colored line helps with this. What I got on here, this is 4-pound Verivis. It's in their Super Trout Advanced series. It's called the Bush Trail. It's not the most visible line. They do have a sight edition. It's a really bright green line. I did a review on. I'll put that link up above. Now this line, it's touted to be more tough than that the sight edition, which actually has been a really good line for me, fishing a lot of these logs and rocks. Ooh, I just had one hit again. Come on. But it's still pretty visible for me above the surface, and a lot of the, ooh, there we go. A lot of that orange disappears too underwater. It's not completely invisible in this super clear spring-fed stream. That's a nice brook trout. But obviously, big smart brook trout like this don't seem to mind. Oh, come on. Oh, he's still under. Look at this. Swing and a miss on that one. Oh, that's a nice brook trout there. And that one came off of multiple passes on that same log. You know, that's a nice looking brook trout. Starting to get its colors a little bit. A lot of times brook trout will get really colorful, like the breast will almost turn like a golden color and the fins would be really, really bright. There you go. All right, so another, I don't want to say unique property, but a unique way that you can fish floating baits that you can't really fish suspending or sinking baits is there's a log that's right here that's going across it, if you can see that, and there's a little pool that's there. That's going to be a high percentage area. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to cast upstream of that log. I'm going to let my lure almost float up on top, and then right when I get over that log, I'll just give a couple of quick little twitches, or sometimes I'll just let it sit. It kind of depends on the mood of the fish. That looks like a grasshopper or something that's just being helplessly brought downstream. Ooh, one came up after it. So if I do that and I don't see the fish, I hurry up and get my lure back, so that way the fish isn't kind of like committing, coming back, and then it eventually sees me. As you can see, sometimes you might just pass that spot over. I made, I don't know, probably 20 casts to this so far, and I got that fish right off there. And even that big brook trout, that came after about 10 casts. So there's a spot in the middle. I don't know if the camera can pick it up. So there's this little nub that comes up. That creates an eddy behind it. There's also kind of there's another spot that comes up a little bit too that creates an eddy. So between there is almost like a funnel. So I can let the lure sit there and get right into that funnel. A lot of times fish will come up. Or if I can get it to sit inside these eddies, keeping my line up off the water quite a bit. That's another way you can always like let the lure pause there, and a lot of times you get hit that way. So I'll go through the eddy first down here. I'll bring it up over. You kind of see how that lure reacts. It just kind of floats naturally in those funnels that fish would normally sit at. If I go behind this eddy that's right here, right on that little nub there, I always cast upstream of it, of course. I kind of just come along, do those little twitches. It just kind of pauses there for a second. A lot of times that's when those fish are going to come up and hit it. What's really important when you're doing that is making sure that your line stays out of the water as much as possible. So your line will look like this coming down, if you can see that. And the lure might get sucked under a little bit. Okay. So your line will look like this, and your lure gets sucked down a little bit, or whatever the eddy does. But that's going to be key to getting those bites. Right, so One thing I like to do, especially in this really shallow, clear water, is I like to walk the edge as much as I can. Even if I'm wearing camouflage right now, but even if you're not wearing camouflage, when those fish are looking up, you're not silhouetting yourself. Say if you're in the middle of the stream, no matter what you're wearing or whatever you're doing, you're still up against a white or blue surface up in the sky. So you just look like a big silhouette standing there. Versus if you're up against the trees, you can't really, the fish won't be able to see you as easy. Now, what can be kind of challenging with and frustrating with floating baits is when you're trying to hit the bottom part of that hole. Like, you know that fish, they're trying to sit on the bottom, like out of the main current, but they can still see underneath that log because water goes over the log, but also under the log as well. So with a sinking bait, sometimes if you're trudging through like upstream, they'll see that lure making contact with the bottom, like underneath the log, and they'll come up and get it, and then you bring them up over the log or whatever, however you end up landing the fish. Or if you let it sink like right next to the log, it'll come down and you can flutter it a little bit before the current will take your line downstream. So it can be frustrating with the faster current to fish floating lures, but if you're able to control your line, it's really beneficial. All right, as you saw, floating lures are definitely effective. They're not as attractive and flashy as those sinking JDM minnows that a lot of people use, but they definitely still produce results. There's a lot of unique areas that are best fished with floating lures. Sinking lures and suspending lures have a little bit issues. Say hitting those real subtle bites on top or working those eddies really good on top as well. As you saw, a lot of brook trout still hit top water. It's really shallow, clear creek. And I think especially these little bit more advanced baits like this Duel bait cast really, really well. It's been windy out here. It still casts really good. So if you want to see these future trout instructional videos or just BFS fishing in general, make sure you subscribe. Also comment down below what sort of content you want to see in the future.